Radical leftist types have figured out how to weaponize these investigative boards, and the boards themselves have become staffed pretty much uniformly with social justice oriented, politically correct, faux compassionate, narcissistic commissars, and they do everything they can to make life miserable for anyone who doesn't share their political opinions. I mean, it's actually almost beyond comprehension to me that I'm engaged in a battle in my country of Canada where I have to defend my right to practice my profession as a licensed psychologist. And I would say especially with my educational pedigree. I mean, Jesus, I was a professor at Harvard and the University of Toronto. I trained clinical psychologists, and the fact that I have to defend my right to conduct my own profession because I retweeted a tweet from the official leader of Canada's Conservative Opposition Party and criticized Justin Trudeau and have made, at least upon occasion, conservative political pronouncements. The fact that that has now made me subject to heavy-handed punishment and investigation by a government-sponsored regulatory board it's absolutely incomprehensible. And so that's also, I would say, difficult emotionally because I just can't believe it's happening. Like, what the hell? This is insane. And so, I mean, and it's, the other thing I think too, it's so strategically foolish on the part of the college. I mean, it's one thing to go after me for, let's say, saying something not so pleasant about Ellen Page or about the Swimsuit Illustrated model. At least you could have an argument about whether or not I was using undue force in my argumentation on those grounds, But to pillory me for engaging in what are clearly political conversations is, well, I don't even know what to say about it. I can't believe it's happening. It's beyond comprehension to me. And so, and that makes me think, well, is it just me? Because people tweet out at me, well, Peterson, you always seem to be in trouble with one authority or another. Maybe it's just you. It's like, where there's smoke, there's fire, And I can understand why people think that way. And if something happens to you repeatedly, you have to start wondering if it's you or the situation. But the way that I'm dealing with this, the way that we've dealt with this as a family right from the beginning is just to make it all public, right? And to allow light to be shone on the situation and to derive our conclusions mostly as a consequence of watching the broad public response. And I'm trying to do exactly the same thing here. Like, I'm a very guilt-prone person, and when someone comes after me with accusations, I'm very likely to assume that there's a core of truth in them. And but I also believe that I have the right to defend myself. And one of the ways of doing that in this situation, this is why we're having this conversation, is like, I don't have faith that I can expect fair treatment at the hands of this board. And I also don't have any faith, partly because I've talked to a bunch of my legal friends, I don't have a lot of faith in the Canadian judiciary. I mean, people have told me, law professors have told me now that they see continually Canadian courts who are extremely activist in nature dispensing completely with such niceties as common law precedent when they're rendering their judgments. And so, yikes. I certainly don't believe that the College of Psychologists will treat me fairly. I have seen them treat very few people fairly. And I don't believe that even if we push this forward on the judicial front, which is our plan at the moment, like implementing a challenge to their ruling, for example, on Canadian constitutional grounds, because at least in principle, we have the right to free speech and freedom of conscience in this country, although I don't really think we do. Yeah, in principle. Yeah, the protection has turned out with the Canadian Charter of Rights is an unbelievably weak and poorly written document that provides Canadians with almost no protection for their rights whatsoever. It was definitely a giant step backwards in relationship to the English common law tradition. And we're now subject to an extraordinarily badly written document whose fundamental propositions can be superseded by the government anytime they think there's a sufficiently dire state of affairs. So So I'm making it public, and people can decide for themselves. I'll release every bit of correspondence between the college and me over the next few days, redacting out the identifiers. And, I've been...
On your website?
I've been ambivalent. Yeah. I've been ambivalent about that too, because part of me thinks, well, these people who are complaining to me, they shouldn't get to do it anonymously and hidden away from any consequences of their accusations. But I believe that I'm legally and hypothetically, ethically required to maintain privacy even in the face of these, what are essentially legal attacks. And, like I said, I'm ambivalent about that because I don't see why I should be made public in such a manner without my accusers having to bear the weight of some responsibility for weaponizing this bureaucracy and against me. Now, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Well, it's because
I'm not going to do it.
It's because you've been harming people on Twitter and they're saving people from your harm.
Yeah, that's the rationale, exactly. Well, and it's also been difficult to formulate a defense because I'm not even sure, and this is, I think, part and parcel either of the ignorance of the college or their incompetence. I can't even tell what I'm being accused of.